It was a perfect wedding day, until three kids, full of mischief and determination, barged into the lavish ceremony with a shocking plan to kidnap the groom. But what followed was a series of events no one could have predicted. The ballroom gleamed with gold accents and crystal chandeliers, the air heavy with the scent of roses and anticipation. The guests, well dressed in tuxedos and evening gowns, were waiting eagerly for the grand entrance of the bride, Vanessa Hayes, the CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire. But the attention was quickly stolen by three children, Eli, Sophie, and their older brother Max, who stood in the doorway with mischievous grins, wearing oversized suits and holding a banner that read, "We're here to save Mom." Eli, the youngest at 9, was the mastermind. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd, searching for the groom, Victor Langston, a charismatic and notoriously private billionaire. His older sister Sophie, a smart-mouthed 13-year-old, nudged him forward, while their 15-year-old brother Max lingered nervously, not sure if they could pull this off. The wedding had been months in the making. The tabloids had followed every detail of Vanessa's upcoming marriage. But the kids weren't just crashing this wedding for fun. Their mother, Rachel, had been the love of Victor's life years ago, before he disappeared without a trace. They were determined to reunite their mother with the man she still loved, despite the cold distance he had kept ever since he'd left them. The plan? Kidnap the groom, bring him to their mother, and somehow convince him to marry her on the spot. Simple enough for children who believed in fairy tales, but complicated by the grown-up world they were about to crash into. The first hint that things were not going according to plan came when Victor, standing beside Vanessa in his tailored tuxedo, raised an eyebrow as the kids stormed into the venue. The room went silent as everyone turned toward them, and the children's hearts skipped a beat. Max's palms began to sweat. He'd never imagined it would feel this daunting to face so many people, but his determination pushed him forward. "Mom still loves you," Sophie yelled, ignoring the whispers and glances from the guests. Her voice rang out with raw emotion, carrying the weight of years of unanswered questions. "You left her without a word. You promised you'd come back for her. Well, we've come to make you keep that promise." Eli, who had spent hours planning this with his siblings, held up a small device, a GPS tracker he'd stolen from his uncle's workshop. He pointed it straight at Victor. "We know where you've been hiding, Langston. You've got a lot of explaining to do." Victor looked taken aback, his piercing blue eyes narrowing. He wasn't just surprised by the intrusion. He was impressed. These kids were fearless, but they had no idea what they were walking into. For a brief moment he glanced at Vanessa, who looked on in shock, her hand instinctively clutching her bouquet of roses. She had no idea what was happening. In that instant, Victor saw the children not as enemies, but as pawns in something far more complicated than they realized. Victor's business empire had taken him all over the world, and in those years he'd buried everything related to Rachel and their life together. It had been a painful decision, but one he thought was necessary to protect everyone involved. But here they were, the kids, rude, audacious, and with a chip on their shoulder about him. They knew things about him that no one should have known. What were they really after? As the tension thickened, Eli, sensing the moment slipping away, gestured to the hotel staff to block the exits. "You're not leaving until you marry our mom. Today, right now." The guests' hushed murmurs turned into excited chatter as they wondered if this was some sort of stunt. But no, this was real, and things were about to get much more complicated. Victor's jaw clenched as he turned to Vanessa, his face still a mix of disbelief and anger. "You knew about this?" he asked, his voice tight with restrained fury. Vanessa's face flushed a deep shade of red. She hadn't anticipated this, not in a million years. "No, I didn't know," she stammered, stepping away from him. Her mind raced, recalling the years of silence after Victor had disappeared. She'd spent so long trying to convince herself that he wasn't coming back, that he wasn't worth the heartache. Yet, here he was, standing right in front of her. The kids were relentless, though. They stood firmly in front of Victor as if daring him to move. Eli's small frame puffed up with confidence. "You think this is funny? Well, it's not. You owe us. You owe Mom." Sophie added, She gave up everything for you, and you just disappeared. I've watched her cry over you for years. You owe her a lifetime, Victor." Victor's mind raced, torn between the years of silence and the bitterness of their words. But something gnawed at him. Their accusations hit harder than he expected. Was it guilt, or was it the realization that he couldn't escape his past anymore? Before he could respond, Max, ever the mediator, spoke up. "Enough of this. We know you're not the villain you make yourself out to be. We just want you to talk to Mom. We don't want anything else. Just talk." The room stood still, waiting for Victor's next move. This was no longer a wedding. It was a confrontation. Victor looked around the room at the stunned guests. For the first time in years, the weight of his past seemed to come crashing down. He had spent so long running from his mistakes, but now there was no escape. He turned back to Vanessa, who was waiting for him to make a choice, her eyes filled with longing and something else, perhaps the faintest hint of hope. But before he could make up his mind, the tension in the room was shattered by a voice no one expected, a voice that came from the back of the room, cutting through the quiet murmur. "I'm sorry, but you've all got it wrong." The room's attention snapped to the newcomer, an older woman in a plain yet elegant dress, Rachel, their mother. The kids, shocked, turned to see her walking towards them. Rachel's presence filled the room with a quiet, unwavering strength. Her eyes, still beautiful yet aged by time, locked onto Victor's. There was no anger, no bitterness in her gaze, only a calm understanding. "Mom?" Sophie asked, her voice barely a whisper. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but it certainly wasn't this. Victor, too, was speechless. His heart raced, and for the first time in years, he felt truly vulnerable. Rachel stopped in front of him, her expression unreadable. "I didn't want you to know, Victor," Rachel said softly. "I didn't want the kids to know that I never really stopped loving you." Her voice cracked just slightly, the only sign of emotion breaking through her composed exterior. The kids stared at their mother in disbelief. This was not what they had planned for. They wanted their mother to get the closure she deserved, but it seemed like she already had it. They had always believed that their father had abandoned them, but now they saw the truth. Victor stepped forward, his hands trembling as he reached for Rachel's. "I never stopped loving you either. I left to protect you, but I can see now that it was the worst mistake of my life." The tension in the room began to fade as the past so long buried came to the surface. Rachel took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, she felt free. "I let you go, Victor, but now we need to let the past stay where it belongs. I never needed you to come back for me. I just needed to let you go." The revelation hit harder than anyone could have expected. The children stared at their mother in disbelief, unsure how to process what had just transpired. They had been on a mission to reunite their mother with the man she loved, but now they realized the truth. They had been fighting a battle that no longer needed to be fought. Eli, Sophie, and Max exchanged confused glances. They had always thought that their mother had never gotten over Victor's disappearance, but now they saw that she had, in her own way, moved on. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but they had to accept it. Victor, too, was torn. He had wanted to be a part of their lives again, but the moment felt surreal. His mind raced as he tried to reconcile the man he had become with the love he had once shared with Rachel. He had been so focused on protecting her from the world that he hadn't seen the impact of his disappearance on their children. Max, always the level-headed one, broke the silence. "We just wanted you two to talk. We didn't know. Rachel smiled softly at her children, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "You did more than that. You gave me the strength to let go of something I didn't realize I was still holding on to." The room was quiet now, the wedding forgotten. There was no dramatic conclusion, no happily ever after. Just a quiet understanding that sometimes the biggest revelations come not from what we expect, but from what we've been avoiding. Victor's heart swelled as Rachel's words settled in. He had thought he would walk away from this moment, retreat back into his life, but he realized something. He wasn't the same man who had left years ago. The love he had for Rachel had never disappeared, and seeing the woman she had become made him wonder if it was time to truly move on from the past. He turned to Rachel. "I don't want to walk away again," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel's eyes softened, her lips curling into a faint smile. "You've already walked away once, Victor. We both need to move on." Victor nodded, his heart heavy but understanding. They had been through too much to expect a fairy tale ending. The past couldn't be erased, but the future still held possibilities. As Rachel turned and walked out of the room with the kids, Victor stayed behind, a silent witness to the changes that had taken place. The wedding had long since been forgotten, the grand ballroom now empty, except for the soft echoes of what had just transpired. Outside, the night sky was clear, the stars twinkling like distant memories. Victor stood alone in the hallway, the weight of his decisions heavy on his chest. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. Rachel had let go of him, and in doing so, she had allowed him to finally let go of the past. He didn't know where his future lay, but one thing was clear. He couldn't change the past, but he could shape what came next. The children, once so full of rage and confusion, had found their own sense of closure. They understood now that their mother had moved on in a way they hadn't seen, and that love was something that couldn't be forced or reclaimed. And as the door closed behind them, the world outside felt just a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter. They had all changed in their own way. The ending was not what anyone had expected, but maybe, just maybe, that was for the best.